I'm calling it now. Jahmyr Gibbs, James Conner, and Jonathan Taylor will all score multiple touchdowns this week. Yes, you heard me right. Even Jonathan Taylor. We dig into and debate our running back and quarterback rankings on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with the NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. No, I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. It is time to start our positional rankings for week 16. We're going to start with our running backs and quarterbacks today. We'll get to our wide receivers and tight ends tomorrow. Right at the top here for our running backs, we have them switch. You have Jahmyr Gibbs 1, Saquon Barkley 2. I have Barkley 1, Gibbs 2. No surprise here, but let's talk about what we expect out of Jahmyr Gibbs without David Montgomery, who's officially going to be done for this year. But he gets a nice matchup in Chicago. The Lions should want to run the ball a lot. The last time we saw Gibbs play without Montgomery was in week 8 of last year. He had 31 touches in that game for 189 yards and a touchdown. So, yeah, I expect Gibbs to go off without Montgomery this week.
Yeah, and Craig Reynolds and Sion Vaki are the backups right now, so they're going to work them in, but it's not going to be the split we saw with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, like alternating a few series here. It's not going to happen. Jahmyr Gibbs, they can trust as a workhorse. They have to be a little careful, right? They have enough injuries, so they want to overwork him with the playoffs ahead and a long haul to consider. But they also need to run him to protect their defense. Their defense is in a lot of trouble right now. And we said when the running game works, Jared Goff gets comfortable, especially against a tough pass defense such as Chicago. Goff is not always all that good on the road and in weather, right? So Jahmyr Gibbs can be that mutter, if you will, here to kind of handle the power work. He's going to get the receiving. He's going to get all the goal line touches, so that's great if you have him. So he could just carry a lot of teams right now. If you have Gibbs and you're like, okay, his upside is capped by David Montgomery, that's not going to be the case anymore. So I love Gibbs this week. I liked him at 1 last week. He came through big time with another big game. He's just a plus talent. So the Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, those first-round picks from last year, I really like those guys. But you also like 2 guys that are going to produce big time as well this week. One who did it last week, one who did not and decided to drop a touchdown for us.
Yeah, so James Conner, we both have top 6 this week. You have him at 5 and actually at 6. So you have your numbers a little mixed up here. And I also have James Conner at 6, just below Bijan and Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry. So that's my top 5. It goes Barkley, Gibbs, Robinson, Jacobs. Your top 5 goes Gibbs, Barkley, Jacobs, Robinson, Chase Brown. And then at 6, there is James Conner. He gets a great matchup, right? He's finished as a running back 7 and running back 1 overall over the last 2 weeks. And you can't ask for a more favorable matchup than the Panthers, like James Conner. There's no reason for him not to have 100 rushing yards and a couple of rushing touchdowns in this game.
Yeah, he's motivated for multiple reasons. The Cardinals are trying to catch now the Rams, who are in first place in this division, the number 4 seed. So when you look at that, you have the Seahawks as well. And the Seahawks have their hands full with the Vikings this week. So the Cardinals could gain some ground. The Rams are playing the Jets in a bit of a toss-up game. So there's some motivation to play well. The Cardinals typically play better at home. That's true. But it is the Panthers. This is the best matchup you can have for the running game. Connor's coming off a monster game with a couple scores last week. So I think that momentum carries. It's nice that he can have a big game again. Gibbs can have a big game. I mentioned Robinson. Jonathan Taylor might have had a big game. It was a game changer in many ways. Because if he scores that touchdown, the Colts might give him more work. They have a lead. Instead, they let the Broncos walk back into it. So again, Jonathan Taylor is probably never going to do that in his life again. Let the ball loose before he's fully over the goal line and deep into the end zone. But you look at this matchup against the Titans, he does pretty well in division games. And this is a Titans matchup. So I do like Jonathan Taylor. For some reason, he gets either contained by himself or the Colts. I'm like, let this guy loose. He's the guy that you need to really win games.
Yeah, he hasn't scored a rushing touchdown since week 8. And I do think that changes this week. He gets the Titans, who have allowed the most scrimmage touchdowns to running backs this season, with 18 they've allowed this year. And again, he should have scored one last week. He dropped it before, fumbled it right before the line. Nobody forced him to do it, right?
Yeah.
He just was celebrating too early. But for the last 5 weeks, he has 21 carries, 24, 25, 22. There's no reason the Colts won't be running a lot in this game. I do think he wants to make up what he did last week. So I think he gets into the end zone multiple times, and he's a really good play. Right now, we both have Jonathan Taylor as our running back 11. I will end up moving him up towards because I do really think this is going to be a great week for him. Other guys in our top 10, Kyron Williams, Devin Achane. Achane does have a harder matchup, but you're still playing him. Now, 2 guys that really disappointed us last week, Joe Mixon and Derrick Henry. They both get tough matchups against this week. Joe Mixon has to face a really good Chiefs run defense. Derrick Henry has to face the Steelers, so they can be run on times, but the Ravens offense typically kind of really struggles against the Steelers. Which one do you feel better about bouncing back, or do you think both will be good this week?
Well, I think it's Derrick Henry because he wasn't all that bad last week. It's the fact that you had 5 touchdowns from Lamar, and he also stole about half the rushing yards. He actually had 65 to, I think, Henry's 67. So if he got a little bit more of that, he would have been fine. The Steelers, I would figure the Ravens play better in the rematch at home, right? They will play better at home, I think. I mean, I'm not going to say Derrick Henry goes off, but there's a pretty good chance he scores to redeem himself, and that's why I'm at number 8. Where Joe Mixon can see some tough sledding. I couldn't drop him below 16. You have him at 14 just because he's Joe Mixon, and he's going to get the volume. He always has a chance to score, but the Chiefs have been so stingy on running backs, and now this game has flipped a little bit, right? You didn't have a high total to begin with these defenses playing well, but now Mahomes is playing. It's a tough running game matchup for either side in this one. So I don't know how many points you're going to get. I think you're going to see some pass rush tee off a little bit on both guys. So I don't know what to expect, but again, you're playing Mixon because of the volume, but I feel much better about Henry this week.
Yeah, and 2 of the last 3 games, I mean, Mixon has gotten 14 carries, 12, so it hasn't been like insane on the ground, but he's still getting used heavily as a receiver. It's not efficient, but he's got 5 receptions. So Joe Mixon still has to be played. It just, like you said, just temper some expectations there. Another guy that, I mean, Breece Hall. Mm-hmm. We know the talent he has, and we know his upside that he can have in any given game. But over his last 4 games played, or 5 games played, it's been 9 points, 10 points, 6 points, 12 points. He had that one big game in there at 27 points. He's not seeing the targets as of late. The last 2 games played, he has 3 total targets. And he only got 9 carries in his first game back from injury. He did get the rushing touchdown to save his day. Can we trust Breece Hall? It's a fine matchup against the Rams.
Well, here's what's happening, and it's related to what's going on with Aaron Rodgers, right? He's like, I'm going to throw downfield to my receivers as much as possible. He's kind of said, I'm not doing the checkdowns. I'm not running the ball. It's weird. It's like all of a sudden he has something to prove, and he's putting up sneaky numbers. In the end, his stats are going to be better than we all expected. It's going to be like from 2 years ago with the Packers. So he's just so intent on now throwing the ball downfield with receivers. It's almost trying to prove a point that he's still got it or something. If he wants to come back, he's in control. So again, Aaron Rodgers has controlled and changed a lot of things on this team all season long. And now he's affecting Breece Hall. Now, I don't think the checkdowns are necessarily going to be there. I think he's going to be aggressive. The Rams can give up some big plays downfield. We saw that a couple weeks ago against the Bills, when the conditions were right, that there were some big plays. So I'm a little worried about Breece Hall getting what we want in terms of the receiving workload, which is a big part of what he does well. But again, you're playing him, hopefully that he'll get 15 touches in this game and hope for the best.
Yeah, and I think I'm okay with sitting him if I have better options.
Mm-hmm.
No, because there's a lot of guys who are going to backup guys getting shots now. Like if Kenneth Walker's out again and you have Zach Charbonnet, I'm playing Zach Charbonnet over Breece Hall this week for sure. Rico Dowdle or Bucky Irving, who have been getting a lot of touches. Like, I'd rather play those guys than take the risk with Breece Hall. I have Hall at running back 22, even at 19. So like, yeah, he's a low end RB2. And the only reason he's there is because we know what his ceiling can be, but I won't be shocked if he does worse than that. We are going to get into the rest of our running back rankings here. I just talked about Bucky Irving. Is he a good play against the Cowboys? Will he have to split again with Rachaad White? Let's discuss that. We'll take a quick break and get to it here shortly.
This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. Get ready to tackle all the action here. It's a big week and a big week coming up because you got games all throughout. You got a Saturday pair of games. You got the Christmas games coming next week. So a lot of good stuff coming, a lot of action. And it's a holiday, so you may want a little bit of a distraction there. And you can play on FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. We'll get started again with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's only at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more, even through the holidays, with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
It's that time of the year. The college football playoff is back, and with a newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. All right, we got a lot more running backs to discuss. I brought up Zach Charbonnet. You know, if Kenneth Walker's out, he's an automatic start. James Cook, automatic start. Chuba Hubbard had a disappointing week last week. But Bucky Irving had to split the backfield with Rachaad White after, like, he was pretty much dominating those touches, right? But he had to split it last week, 15 to 15 carries each. Now, Bucky Irving still put up 117 rushing yards, but didn't get a touchdown. So let's talk about Bucky Irving and Chuba Hubbard. Who do you feel better about? Are you playing both this week? Irving gets the Cowboys, Hubbard gets the Cardinals.
Yeah, I would feel rather good about both players. I think I still like Bucky Irving ahead of Rachaad White, I should say. He is a 15 ranking for me. I have Rachaad White down at 21. Now, when you look at this other situation and Chuba Hubbard, I mean, the Cardinals are not very great against the run either. So I like Hubbard. I actually have him all the way up at 13. The Cardinals are just bad on the road. I'm just going to say that they give up a lot more rushing. It's just a bad defense up front. So I think the Panthers have to get Chuba Hubbard going. He lost maybe some confidence a couple weeks ago with that lost fumble, but he comes back here. There's really no Jonathan Brooks. So I think the Panthers can make this game rather competitive. I don't see the Cardinals running away with this one early. I think methodically they'll pound them with James Conner, but I think the defense will keep the Panthers in it enough for Hubbard to get the touches. So again, another guy that pretty much can eat up all the volume, and the matchup is really good. So I do like Hubbard quite a bit more because he's not sharing the way that Irving is.
Yeah, I feel really good about Hubbard as well. I also have him at running back 13 this week. It hasn't been as great for him as it was in the middle of the season, but I do think he bounces back. Hopefully he can get some more receptions that he was seeing as well. But Irving's still a good play. Like you said, I have him at 16, right with you at 16. So we're actually pretty much perfect on these guys. I'm a little bit lower on Rachaad White at 25, but Rachaad White's also a playable guy. Just doesn't, Irving just feels a bit safer. Now, these two are not safe at all, but they're starting to come along lately. Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, right? The Jaguars running game is starting to come alive. I do think Etienne looks better than he did for the majority of the season, right? He's looking a little bit better. He got a majority of the carries last week, and they get a really good matchup against the Raiders. So I do think that maybe you can trust these guys this week. I'm leaning a little bit towards more Travis Etienne with Aiden O'Connell playing. That means maybe the Raiders can put up some points where it's not just running with Tank Bigsby, right? Maybe they'll still pass the Etienne and utilize his skill set. You have them ranked back to back at 24 and 25. I have Etienne at 23 with Bigsby at 30. But talk about this duo. Would you trust them in your lineup for the fantasy playoffs?
Well, I think I'd actually trust Bigsby a little bit more because I think he could score where Etienne just has a lot of trouble scoring. So I'll just say that. So I'm not sure about the receptions because right now this passing game is going a lot through Brian Thomas Jr. Mac Jones is just peppering him with targets. Guess who had a lot of targets as well was Brenton Strange, the tight end pickup of the week. So I think this offense with no Christian Kirk, no Evan Ingram, no Gabe Davis, it's really funneling to two players. And so I don't know how much Etienne will be needed here. I think Mac Jones, actually with each game he's played for Trevor Lawrence, is gaining a little bit of confidence. Remember, he wasn't a total schlub with the Patriots, right? It was just at the end of the tenure. They didn't like him because he had limited upside here. But he's still a competent quarterback when he's got some help. And they definitely have some help going, and the Raiders matchup. Actually, the Raiders are better than you think against receivers. So I think this could be a few more checkdowns for Etienne, but I think they're both playable, but I would reserve them for more like flex options. I think they might be a good flex over forcing in, say, one of the Chiefs backs this week because I don't like that split and that usage at all.
Well, let's talk about that because I would go with Etienne and Tank Bigsby over any of the Chiefs backs. Would you go with them over like Najee Harris against the Ravens, over Tyron Tracy against the Falcons, or DeAndre Swift against the Lions? All three guys who have been struggling. Would you start an Etienne over those three? Because I actually have Etienne ranked higher than all three of those.
Yeah, I think I would start him potentially over Harris and Tracy. It just depends on what else you have on your team for liability. Like I'm able to sit Tracy in a league because I can pivot to a wide receiver at flex. Same thing with Harris, you might have that option. But DeAndre Swift hasn't been eating up the volume. He had a decent game last week. So, again, if you're going with a split guy in a tough matchup, and the Falcons are tough, and the Ravens are tough against the runs, then you could say, okay, I'm going to pivot to this matchup or at least have a chance, right? A touchdown or a big play versus just running into a stone wall and having nobody produce. But Swift, I would play over them just because, again, there's nobody else really since Roschon Johnson went on the shelf. So Swift can really build that. And I think he'll have a better, quote, revenge game because the Lions defense a lot more depleted than the first time we saw it.
Yeah, the Lions defense technically on paper, like if you're looking at them in fantasy against running backs, they're good. They're good at stopping them, but they have so many injuries.
James 16 last week.
16 defensive players now in IR for the Lions. Like, they have fallen apart. I feel bad for their defense. So DeAndre Swift, I probably feel a little bit safer with him than Etienne or Bigsby, but they're kind of in the same tier for me. Now, these three backup running backs, I actually think all three are very playable this week. Isaac Guerendo against the Dolphins, Jerome Ford against the Bengals, and Kendre Miller against the Packers. We'll see if, obviously Kendre Miller comes down to if Alvin Kamara is in or out this week. But the Bengals have allowed the third most rushing touchdowns this season, so that's good for Jerome Ford. And then the Dolphins and Packers are middle of the pack against fantasy running backs. So if Guerendo and Miller get the volume, they should have pretty solid days.
Yeah, I'm actually debating one of these moves here because I have Jonathan Taylor and I don't want to play Tyrone Tracy Jr., so I'm debating between Guerendo and Ford. I could actually play one in the flex, so we'll think about that. But when I look at Guerendo, I mean, he's still a lead back on the 49ers, and the Dolphins are not a scary run defense. So I would say he's first for me. Jerome Ford, he's not game script dependent. He's a good receiver. He can also get it going and score, as you mentioned, with the Bengals. So I think he's going to be okay either way. I'm a little bit worried about Kendre Miller because I'm not sure how great of a pass catcher he is. And given the quarterback situation, I'm not 100% sure. Like, he'll see that Alvin Kamara stuff. And I can see them really getting down to the Packers pretty early in Lambeau. So we'll let Kendre Miller. Like, I like Alvin Kamara quite a bit because he has that check down potential. I have him at 18 if he should go. But I don't know if Kendre Miller can make up for that. I mean, a lot of his production last week was rushing. Maybe they have to expand his role, right, if Kamara's out. But I'm just not sure when I'm get there. Where I think Guerendo and Ford, I can see their games materialize in my head a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'm totally with you on my rankings here. Like I match what you're saying because I have Garendo at 18, Jerome Ford at 19, and then Kendre Miller at 27. So Kendre I have more as like a flex option, a very like a high-end wide running back 3 option. Well, I'm saying Garendo and Ford are pretty solid RB2 options this week. Let's transition over to our quarterback rankings. We have some kind of gross matchups this week where these really high scoring quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson and Jayden Daniels, they're getting tough matchups. We will discuss that right after we take a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Today's episode it tells you a little bit about what Prize Picks is. We will get into our Prize Picks of the week on Friday, so stick with that. If you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy, whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports that are in season now. Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas, is what they're calling it, and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out when you get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. That's pretty sweet as well. This week, check it out. Here, there's some good stuff to look at. I do like some this weekend. We'll get in those picks of the week. So basically, tune in on Friday is what I'm saying, because we gave some really good picks last week. So that's what we want every week to come through. Now, I will say on Thursday, I know we're on the more side in this fantasy show. I like the left side a little bit with Bo Nix and Justin Herbert. I think it's going to be a tough matchup. So it's quick, simple, so much fun to challenge yourself and your friends, whether you're going more and less with these Prize Picks projections. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game.
This episode is also brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even notice I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and it helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in the canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, let's get into our quarterback rankings for week 16. No surprise, we have Josh Allen, number 1. He is a beast and deserves to be number 1. Jalen Hurts, we have number 2. Joe Burrow, we have number 3. There is no difference there. We finally get into the slightest of differences at number 4. I have Baker Mayfield, and you have Baker Mayfield at 5. So we are both agreeing Baker Mayfield is going to have a great week against the Cowboys. He's been the quarterback 5 overall in each of the last 2 weeks. Cowboys are allowing the 4th most points per game to quarterbacks this season. And weirdly enough, the Cowboys defense stinks at home, way worse at home than they are on the road, while the Buccaneers have scored the most points per game on the road among all teams in the NFL this year.
Yeah, those are great stats. And we saw that play for the Buccaneers in Los Angeles last week, put up 40 on the Chargers. So they're definitely hot. And Mike Evans, look, I don't care who's covering him. They got him going last week, making big plays. I think the emergence of Jalen McMillan has helped because you got to start paying attention to now 2 receivers again on this team other than K-Dot and a tight end. So this could be a good field stretching day for all these players. And the Cowboys, they struggle a lot with the big plays. They can give them up to Evans. They can actually give them up to Otten. They've struggled with that down the middle of the field and McMillan. So you add that up, that looks like a pretty good day for Baker Mayfield. It just comes down to how many touchdowns he can put up and how much resistance Cooper Rush and the Cowboys can provide here. So you want to get touchdowns for everybody. Ideally, Rashad White and Bucky Irving will score, and then you'll get at least 2 from Baker Mayfield with like 300 yards. That'll be the ideal situation, maybe 3. But when you look at it, I mean, the matchup is so good here for Baker overall, and he usually plays well when he returns to Texas, his home state.
Yeah. And then after Baker, though, I think it gets really, really hard because we have a lot of players who have either disappointed or we have players with really, really hard matchups, like Lamar Jackson against the Steelers, Jayden Daniels against the Eagles. Now, you still have Lamar at 4, Jayden Daniels at 6. I have him at 5 and 6 as well, so I'm still keeping him high. The other guy who's been great, Jared Goff, he has a really tough matchup against Chicago. We're both lower on him. We'll get to him in a second. Let's start with Lamar and Jayden Daniels. The Eagles are the number 1 total defense in the NFL this year. They're allowing 12.7 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks since week 6. And we already saw Jayden Daniels struggle against the Eagles this year, but at least this game's at home. Same thing for Lamar. He struggled in Pittsburgh. He always struggles against Pittsburgh in his career, but at least this game is at home.
Yeah, it's very similar situations. We're basing a lot of our bad feelings on both these guys based on what happened the first time. But yeah, being at home is a little bit different for both these guys for sure. And I think they would have made some adjustments from the first game. And I think Jayden Daniels has also been very sharp of late, right? I mean, he's been lighting things up. He's had the better matchups, of course, against the Titans and Saints. That has helped for sure. And so Lamar lighting up the Giants. So maybe they can ride that momentum in this. But I'll just say this. Let's break this down. It's really hard if you got this far because of those guys to sit them for somebody else, because you will just kick yourself if you're trying to force in, a guy that we like is Cooper Rush or Aaron Rodgers, but would you put them in there? I don't think so. And maybe I'd say Sam Darnold is someone you could think of, because I do have a situation where I have Sam Darnold behind Jayden Daniels, but then again, we both like Daniels over Darnold this week. So again, it's really hard to sit them and just watch it and hope for the best. But I think they'll come through a little bit better. Now, they're not going to have weak carrying games like they often do for your team. So keep that in mind. So make sure you have a good balanced lineup, but just like you do every week, to get the good scoring elsewhere.
Yeah. You've been on them this long and they've helped you get here. You kind of just have to ride it through. Now, one guy, though, I think I am fine moving on from. If you played Jared Goff last week and he helped you win, great. This week in Chicago, just historically looking at it, the odds aren't great that he's going to have a good game. Goff has started 4 career games in Chicago. He's averaged 8.9 fantasy points per game in those games. Last year in Chicago, last year he had a good fantasy year too. Last year in Chicago, he scored 4 fantasy points. He put up 161 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. He has never scored more than 16 points in Chicago. Also, just looking at him on the road, that's not played in a dome or in the if it's not played in a dome or warm weather, like a Florida or California game, right? He has never scored more than 14 fantasy points in an away game over the last 2 seasons in any game that's not in a dome or in nice weather. So I'm okay not starting Jared Goff this week. I have him at quarterback 14. He could be lower, but it's not a great week for quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's not a great week, and that's why I couldn't rank him too low. I have him actually in the top 10, but only because some of the things behind it have some more volatility. That includes this matchup that I want to go all in on a little bit, but you just have that little bit of doubt because the Rams and Jets have had some big moments defensively. They've also been terrible defensively. So Aaron Rodgers versus Matthew Stafford. This looked like a Packers-Lions game from 7 years ago, but that's what it is. It's Aaron Rodgers versus Matthew Stafford. Look, Jets defense, typically good, falling apart. Rams defense has been good, but they're young. So I think it's exploitable, especially when Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson are playing the way that Puka Nacua is playing in Cooper Kupp. Maybe we'll erase that 0 out of our memory banks from me putting it up last week against the 49ers. So I think there's a path to both guys. That's how you look at it. You have to look at the receivers. Is there a path to both these guys succeeding? Absolutely, there is, including the fact that they might have to pass to keep up with each other.
I actually really like Matthew Stafford this week. I have him at quarterback 8. I think he's a really good play. I know last week he disappointed greatly. It was downpour. It was a downpour game that happens, right? The week prior, he was quarterback 9. 2 weeks prior to that, quarterback 9. Before that, quarterback 5. Like, he's had some really good weeks as of late. And the Jets defense is falling apart. Just since week 10, they let Kyler Murray, who hasn't really done anything lately, they let him score 28 fantasy points. Anthony Richardson scored 28 fantasy points against them in week 11. Tua put up 24 points against them in week 14. And Mac Jones just had 19 points against them in week 15. So I really like Matthew Stafford. Again, as long as the weather's not bad, but I looked it up for, in that area during the game on Sunday. It's supposed to be cold, like 30s, but no rain, no snow, no wind. Like, it should be all right. So I like Stafford. And I think Rodgers is also a playable guy, but I like him Stafford a lot more. But what about Kyler Murray and Brock Purdy, who both had terrible games last week? But they both get, actually only Murray gets a great matchup. He gets to play the Panthers, allowing the 6th most points per game to quarterbacks. We know they allow a lot of rushing, so maybe Murray can get some rushing yards there too. Unfortunately, Purdy has to face the Dolphins, who have allowed the 2nd fewest fantasy points per games this season. I think you can trust Kyler Murray this week. I am at 7. You have him at 9. You have Purdy ranked higher than me at 8. I have him at 10.
Yeah, I mean, the key for Kyler Murray is it's a really good matchup for Trey McBride. So that is going to help him put up points, as well as, look, Marvin Harrison Jr., it's like he's due for one of those games. It's every few weeks. And then when he has a good game, that means Kyler Murray has a good game. So it's probably going to happen here for him. I do actually like Brock Purdy this week. I know on paper this Dolphins matchup has been tough, but I've also seen the Dolphins defense operate the past couple weeks against Aaron Rodgers and last week CJ Stroud. Now, Stroud didn't light them up, partly because the Dolphins just could not move the ball. They kept making mistakes, so the Texans could stay off the gas pedal. But I think the 49ers, there's some personal stuff in this one. I know, look, I'm sure Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel like each other to some degree, but I think the 49ers are a team that I wouldn't expect to quit. The Dolphins, Tua was calling out some people. There's a bit of dysfunction there, so that's why I don't really like Tua. I have him down at his usual spot around 17. But Purdy, I think the 49ers are just a little bit more together as a team. And I think George Kittle, some of these guys are going to help Purdy produce. So, again, getting a little bit into the weeds about the philosophy of these teams, but it matters this time of season. Who's playing hard, who's going to deliver for you in fantasy, even when things are meaningless. And sometimes that's hard to understand.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting week for sure, because you have games like the Denver Chargers game that we expect to be low scoring. And then you have like the Bills facing the Patriots. Will they have to go off? Like, there's a lot of games like that, or Houston and the Chiefs, like tougher defenses. So hopefully it's not too low of scoring fantasy week for us in week 16. But that's it for us for today for our running back and quarterback rankings. Tomorrow we're going to get to our wide receivers and tight ends, so don't miss that. Please hit that subscribe button on YouTube if that's where you're watching. If you're listening to us on a podcast app, subscribe, give us a like, leave us a review, all the great stuff. We will talk to you tomorrow. Have a great night. Bye, y'all.